the darker and weirder and more sinister it is, the happier I am, man. The whole point of why Rave Cave started. I can still remember the most boring show I had ever seen, and it was a show I worked on. And I worked spotlights for Justin Bieber,
and they were like, sit over here, put your eyes down, don't look at him. And we were like, okay.
Yep.
And then Lionel Richie came up to us and thanked each of us and shook our hands for doing our thing. And like, dude, he's been doing this for decades. Like, he doesn't have to do that. If you're watching and you're in Sydney and you don't, or if you're anywhere in Australia that you could plausibly fly to Sydney for this show, May 18th, me, this guy, more people, it's gonna be fucking amazing. Hi, I'm Mobius, and this is Oscillator One. As some of you may know, in a few short days on May 18th, there will be the first ever proper Mobius headline show happening in Sydney, Australia, at an event called Rave Cave. So I thought I'd do something a little special for this episode and bring on ESIAL, who is a DJ and the founder of Rave Cave, as well as a seasoned veteran of the Sydney music scene. He has loads of stories from his time working as a production and tour manager, as well as a stagehand for the big arena shows that come through the city, the latter of which we actually have in common. We also dig into the evolution of the Sydney music scene through the lockout laws that torpedoed the city's nightlife and were rolled back just in time for COVID to hit, and the culture that's been rapidly growing back from the scorched earth that left. Plus, there are some really useful insights for anyone who's aspiring to be a performer of any kind or an event promoter. It was a fascinating chat, so I hope that you're able to glean something useful from it, or at the very least, walk away from it having learned something new. Enjoy.
Oscillator One.
How's it going, man?
Yeah, not too bad, man. How about you doing? It's nice to finally talk for the first time in person.
I know, after all of the after all those DMs, finally face to
Indeed,
face.
yeah, real person and all that. Scary.
I know, it's weird how that works. It's funny how many people that I've known on the internet and then just like don't ever think about the fact that you've never seen them actually speak. You just see them in like videos or pictures and then text.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, whole strange new world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like
Taking
phone
me back
calls,
to
but
being in lockdown days.
yes. Oh God, that was a weird dream. So let's start back at the beginning, and then we can get into some details on what's going on currently and upcoming. But I
Indeed.
guess the basic groundwork would be what inspired you to start on your own journey in the world of music.
Um, So I've been kind of musically involved since I was a fairly little kid. My mum got me into the concert band playing drums when I was in primary school, about 7 or 8 or so, and did that most of the way through school. And then picked up bass guitar when I was at the end of school. Played in a whole bunch of bands after school, mainly kind of like industrial metal and like alt rock and grunge and stuff like that. But I ran into too many rock stars, shall we call it, in my band experience, and it kind of sucked the joy out of a little bit of it for me. But had quite a few friends who were producers and DJs, and had friends who wanted to bring some decks around to a house party, and that was kind of the first time I really muddled in it, and just kind of really liked delving around and kind of not having to worry about anybody else. And it was also just exploring a whole bunch of new sounds from just being a rock and metal guy for so long, of just this kind of, ungodly larger world of like synth manipulation, different sounds and things that people were doing. Um, so yeah, it's been quite a change from how I started off with music to how I am now. I think if you told the 17-year-old me that I was running nightclubs and playing dark bass music, he'd have a very strange look on his face.
Yeah, that's fair play. So just like the common struggle that bands tend to face at some point in their careers, where like clashing egos make focusing on the actual art more and more difficult.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. Besides one band that I was in, which was a hippie folk band with a very dear friend of mine, which just kind of fizzled a little bit in
Hmm.
its own little way. I just unfortunately had the very bad luck of joining bands with people that had some fairly unnecessary egos, and didn't like the limelight being taken from them. And all but one of those bands ended fairly dramatically. And that's something I've really liked about DJing is just kind of having the just in my selfness to kind of pal around with my own things instead of, I mean, the normal problems that come with bands of just like juggling between everybody with what they want and getting five people in a room and, all that kind of mess.
Absolutely.
So, I've just, it's been nice in the sense of the simplicity of it.
Yeah, definitely. If there's only one person performing and making this the art, then, you get all of the room for your own ego.
Indeed, yeah, needs a hell lot of a room. Um, no, it's. I mean, just the individuality of it, I've found is a little bit more, just a little bit more freeing. Yeah, I think particularly seeing as someone who's just had such a bad run of luck of running into people who weren't exactly amicable, to work with has just made this just a whole much more appealing for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's hard to work with people, dude. Like, I mean, even people that I really enjoy working with, I'm so used to just doing everything like, alone in my room, doing whatever I want. Then when it comes time to do collaborations and stuff, I mean, even like the sweetest people that I love very much, and they'll come back and be like, I want to change this, 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 this. And I'm like, but I like that.
Yeah, but particularly when if it's one that little thing that's just kind of like that you felt it's a little bit of like of lack of a better word, kind of just like a little prize moment for your thing. It's like, do we have to kind of change that?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
How about yourself, man? I'm not actually entirely sure how you started either.
Oh, I've kind of I don't really have like a happy, I've been playing for a long time and always loved music. And here's like baby pictures of me playing a guitar. And like, my parents made me do piano lessons when I was little and I didn't really like it. And then they made me join band and I played the clarinet and then the bass clarinet in high school. Did some marching band. Didn't really like that either though, to be honest. So didn't really ever consider music as something that I'd end up doing. And then maybe high school, I started going to shows when there's like the American dubstep explosion kind of thing popped off. I was into like electro and stuff before that and metal bands and like happy hardcore. But then when the EDM bubble started growing in America, I started getting more interested. And my first ever show was Skrillex at this little like 500 person venue in the city next to where I lived. And I didn't even get to stay for the whole thing. My mom was like, you have to go home at midnight. And he started late. So I got to see like 20 minutes of the set. And then I had to leave.
Oh, good.
Ugh, painful. But after digging into it and going to more and more concerts, I was like, oh my God, I love this. So then, picked up a little Vestax DJ controller and started messing around in my room. And years down the line, after exhausting every single path that I could have taken in uni, like I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I was just like trying everything. And I eventually figured like, oh, I'll go do audio engineering because that's like something that's interested me. And then I could be at shows, I could see them, I enjoy that. So might as well work in it. And then, went through artist management, internships and live recording and studio recording and all this stuff. And then kind of just came to the conclusion, like, if I want to, be a light guy or be a sound guy at the highest level and be working with these huge acts, like these people are on the road half the year. It's a really dangerous, high pressure environment. Like, you're rigging really heavy stuff and you have to be, exceptionally good at your job. And the thing is, like, if you're doing Ed Sheeran's lights or The Weeknd's lights or something, or sound or whatever, or video, and you fuck up, there's 1,000 people who are very qualified who would love to have your job. So I kind of figured, oh, okay, well, if you have to put in that much of yourself to make it as the supporting cast, like I might as well give music a shot, because then even if I fuck up, they can't just replace me.
Yeah, no, I get you. But I mean, there's also another aspect of touring life is just the amount of social sacrifice that you give up. I mean, it's incredibly long days for the most part, which are, how some people do it, I just have no idea. But the amount of like just Christmases, birthdays, weddings, little social arrangements, births of friends, kids, like it's an incredibly emotionally taxing thing to be on the road. But I don't think a lot of people, I mean, there's all the rock star glitz and glamour that people kind of see and talk about. Oh my God, these amazing shows. I'm going to all these cities and look how great it is. But it's a sacrifice to do it. And I don't blame anybody for kind of stepping the toe in the door and realizing, wait, this isn't actually what I want to do, because you've either really got to love doing it or you're a bit of a masochist.
Yeah, definitely true. That's a lot. Big days. I haven't dug into it. I've like worked adjacent to it and heard people's stories. So we'll see over the next few years how this develops. Have you done much touring yourself?
I've only done little bits and pieces, and it's only been fairly local to the east coast of Australia. So I actually recently did my first production management gig last week,
Oh yeah.
which was with an Italian band called Massimo Ranieri. It was a very small tour. We had two shows down in Melbourne. One was at the casino down there. The other is at the Palais Theatre, which is a very, very old cinema palace, which is now a theatre space. And then we had one show up at the Opera House. So three shows, only very small. Massimo is a fairly big deal back in Italy, so it's all kind of touring crew who've come over here are used to shows 3-4 times bigger than what we were doing them. Language barrier was a little bit difficult. Some few cultural differences were a little bit difficult in the way they handled things, but I got through it okay. But my main thing, which I do I suppose for the reference, I've worked in the industry as in live entertainment and music for 13 years now. My main bulk of it has been as a venue technician. I work at a venue called the State Theatre in Sydney, which is another old cinema palace, which is now a venue space. And that's where I spend the vast majority of my time. But yeah, going out on the road is only something I do kind of once every blue moon. I'm fairly stable in Sydney, just taking care of the shows that roll in and out of my own venue.
Yeah, but that was going to be one of my next questions for you. Just like what fields have you explored within the music industry? Like obviously event promoter and DJ, you're in bands, and then also your day job, as it were, or night job.
Yes, it is mainly night job. Yeah.
So like, have you dug into other things beside that, or has it mostly just been what you just talked about?
Originally out of high school, knew I wanted to do something with music, but I wasn't like, I mean, I kind of had the classic rock star image in my head of being a silly little kid, and I'm gonna go out, my band's gonna bloody change the world and all that kind of stuff.
That's right.
Yeah, fairly typical high school daydreamy kind of stuff. But got out of it and really didn't know exactly where I wanted to go and wanted to do for it. I studied at the Australian Institute of Music for about a year and a half in music composition and studio production. But around that time, I also got into a few sub-hire labor companies that work in the industry. It's just kind of spare hands working on bigger shows, with helping with the setup and the pack down and a few specialist jobs in between there as well, and did that for quite a while. And that had its amazing moments. You treat it a lot of the time like it's fairly grunt worky kind of stuff, but on that same thing, I've worked on some of the biggest world tours that came through Sydney for the 5 odd years that I did it. Everything from Beyonce to Adele to Guns N' Roses to like our own national big festivals of Big Day Out and Soundwave, which were the two like alt rock and metal ones, and Future Music Festival, which was like the big like dance music festival that used to happen here, along with a few others. So did that for quite a while, as well as just playing in local bands and helping quasi manage them and handle a lot of the social media stuff and like album design artworks and booking gigs and things like that. And eventually got settled into where I am at the State Theatre now, and I've been there for about 7 years. And my role there is as one of the back of house duty managers for that, is kind of being the head point of call for backstage of the venue while the shows and the pack downs happen. And have only recently fallen into promoting kind of by accident to kind of help facilitate my own DJing stuff, which thankfully has been pretty successful so far for what we do.
Hell yeah.
In this neck of the woods. Yeah.
So which one is your favorite that you've dipped your toes into, you reckon? Or has that changed over time?
Honestly, probably DJing has been my favorite bit, just because it's purely personal and fairly cathartic. And I've also been someone who I think is fairly lucky to the most amount of DJ stuff, that what I do is just kind of letting me do my own thing. It's only been the last 8 months or so that I've come into being asked to play gigs where there's been a sense of limitations for what they want to do, whether that's stylistically or just kind of like, well, I mess around with this stuff and that's just not going to work in that environment. And it's been such a bit of a change that I've really enjoyed having this little box that I've been given for the last couple of events to fit in. Like there's a more traditional goth night, which I'm playing in July, and had to sit and talk down with the promoter with that. And he's like, there's a lot of stuff you muck around with that you can't do just because it won't fit a goth environment. And having a look through, it's just like, there's one of those realizations of just how much R&B influenced stuff I've been putting in my music and the sets. And that, you know, just I've just been really liking that as kind of a, you know, just like that idea of kind of like having a set of walls gives you more creative freedom and having every option in the world, if that makes sense.
No, 100%. Limits are like one of the greatest benefits to creativity, I think.
Oh yeah, very much so. And I've been founding that with this. I suppose for anyone called watching, it's a nightclub event called Halo. It's happening at the Oxford Arts Factory on July the 6th. Come along, it's going to be a fun night.
Oh, yeah.
I've shot through about a third of my set after going for a walk and having this playlist that I just made on Spotify for reference tracks, and then came home and just had a spurt of inspiration for this little wall that I've been given and spat through about 2/3 of the set. And now I'm very much trying not to touch it so I can still have it be fresh closer to the date because it's still 3 bloody months away, or 2.5, whatever it is.
God, I wish I was prepared 3 months before. I've got 3 weeks and I'm like, I keep going through and I'm like, oh, I want to like make some, you know, I was like, this song would be good here. And I was like, I don't have that song. And I was like, I wonder if I have enough time to make it. I just got to make like a build up and a drop and then something to mix out with. We'll see what I can pull.
For what it means, I haven't touched the set for the gig that we're doing in May yet either. That's the only one that I've been pre-prepared for. And it was literally just that bit of inspiration. I've never been this pre-prepared for a show that's coming up ever.
All right, that's reassuring.
But it is my plan for the rest of the afternoon, as I want to sit down and start getting cracking on our set for May 18th, because I am bloody excited for that.
I'm so excited. I'm going to play some weird shit. I hope that's all right.
But the weirder the better. The darker and weirder and more sinister it is, the happier I am, man. The whole point of why Rave Cave started. So Rave Cave started from. Am I getting ahead of where we want to talk about yet?
No, go off. I was curious about that next. What the origin story?
Yeah, so the origins of Rave Cave. So I used to live in a quasi hippie commune house. It was a share house where that I lived in the inner west, and I figured out over the space of about 3 years I lived with 21 separate people, just from either friends sleeping on the couch for a couple of weeks, living out in the garage, or you know, just people kind of coming and going. It's like, it was about 21, 22 people I lived with.
Strong start.
And yes, it was called Fay House, and it was a notorious little party house and commune house in our many circles of friends. And about every 3 months or so, the house would just throw the most bonkers of house parties. Everyone would come along to these damn things and go all night long. And for one of them, a friend asked me if they could bring along DJ decks just to pal around with it. And we'd been looking for an excuse to use the garage for something, because the garage previously had just been kind of everybody's dump space. And then when I moved in, I was like, if I clean that up, can I have it as my little studio space, kind of what I have behind me? And they went, yeah, sure, go for it. Not thinking I'd do anything with it. And then tied it up after a day and a half. And then everyone was kind of blown away with this, you know, that I'd turned what literally was just kind of stuff everywhere, and you couldn't find the floor into like a space where people could come and chill out in. And so it had always been kind of like we need to do something special now. This, you know, when we have parties come around, had a friend who wanted to bring his DJ decks over, and I was like, this is the excuse we need. So we brought his DJ decks around. We plugged it in my sound system I had in there. 2 friends of mine played some actual DJ sets. I just had a whole bunch of different songs and made an absolute mess of myself. And then over the space of a couple of different parties, it just kind of kept growing and growing and growing. Somebody made a poster. I learned how to DJ for some friends. Other friends got on board of wanting to do it. Friends started bringing around smoke machines and lights and props and all sorts of various different things. And then when we eventually moved house into kind of like what's called in Australia a Federation style house, which is more kind of it's more larger rooms, tall ceilings with ornate room ceilings and stuff like that. We had an incredibly large living room. So we eventually turned that into the Rave Cave and started putting more and more of it being in an actual proper, you know, nice fancier room. And had friends coming up to me and be like, dude, this is legitimately actually good. Why have you thought about maybe doing this properly instead of just at house parties? And like, had DJ'd a few other house parties at this point at time. And I was like, yeah, actually, why don't I do this you know, do this properly? And started reaching out to various different clubs that I knew. And the response from all of them was, hey, what you're doing is really cool and interesting, but it's just a little bit too left field for what we're going for. We're not quite sure how it'd mesh. And was getting quite disheartened at that and chatting to friends. And I'm pretty sure it was Alicia Mayhem, who always DJs at Rave Cave with me, was like, dude, you do realize people meant what we're doing in general, not just you. Like, if everyone's kind of saying your stuff's a little bit too weird, why don't you just do your own thing? And I was like, yeah, actually, why did I do my own thing? And so hunted around a whole bunch of different venues that I knew, and quite naturally, with it just being kind of like a, hey, we're a house party and we want to do it legit, didn't get many responses back. But it doesn't exist anymore. But there was a little bar in the middle of Enmore called the Blue Fig Bar, which had a capacity of 42 people, who were very generous and went, yeah, you know what? Let's give you a chance. It's all free entry. Come and have a night of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did it, and somehow for something that was just a house party, we had a line that people were waiting an hour and a half to get in for. And we were all like, oh my God, we have this fantastic proof of concept. The downside of it was this proof of concept happened on the 3rd of March, 2020.
Oh, shit.
So it was barely a week later after having this fantastic first public event, everybody being like, wow, like this is some really cool stuff, that the world shut down. So we didn't have an event for another 12 months. We had one event in 2021, which was in April. But thankfully, from the photos that we got from that, and bus spends, that the venue were very nice to let us know what we'd got for bus spend over the bar. It's like, okay, now I have some actual hard numbers to go to venues with that I know that they like. Here's a spend per head. Here's the amount of people that were waiting at the front. Here's a line of how long the queue is. Here's people inside having a good time. Here's the average spend per head. Yada yada yada. And so that got us into a proper venue, which is called the Oxford Underground, which is up on Oxford Street, which is like our main LGBTQI plus drag road, where most of like queer events and nightclubs happen. So we happened right at the top of that.
Okay.
And the first one of those was sometime in 2022. And kind of that's where I, at least for myself, consider like the first nightclubby part of it happened. It was in a venue that could fit 250 people, with a proper sound system, proper decks, kind of proper everything, paying people in the door. And it's just kind of steadily grown from there, from kind of being an excuse from a friend to bring his decks around to liven up a house party, to now flying you halfway across the globe to come and be our first international headliner.
Hell yeah.
Which is pretty chuff worthy.
Yeah.
That's
well done, dude.
No, thanks, man. It has really been quite endearing just to see how it's kind of organically grown. I've never intended it to be kind of like, let's raise this from, let's keep growing and growing. Let's have this be the biggest, baddest thing around. Rah, rah, rah. I just wanted an excuse to take this out of my living room and do it in a proper venue space with my friends who are already doing it. Like the last event we did are all people who've either played one of the original Rave Caves that were in the house party, or were friends who just came along for it. And it was still just as successful as all the other ones, which was really nice to see. And it's also been nice hearing a lot of the feedback that not only we've got from patrons, but from the venue. A lot of people who've rocked up to it have been kind of like, dude, we've been hunting for this kind of music and it doesn't really happen in most of the Sydney nightclubs. So we've been really lucky to just kind of fall into a niche that we didn't realize needed to be filled for kind of, what people wanting for a certain type of music. But also just the patronage have been really civil and lovely, and just very lucky in just cultivating a very nice, friendly group of people who want to come. It's been a consistent remark from the security and the venue staff of all the venues we've played at, that the people who come along are generally the most well-behaved and the most civil and most respectful when, they've been asked various different things. We've never had anybody thrown out for anything, any violent kind of, or, mishaps or anything like that. I think the only time is, we had two people that got a little bit too drunk, but even then the secos were like, yeah, it's time for you to go. And the people were like, no, we get it. We've had a little bit too much. So it's been really positive on all fronts, which has been a real blessing.
That's so wholesome, man. So
yeah, it is.
It's funny how that works sometimes. It's like the that saying, metalheads are nice people, cosplaying is mean people. And then
Yes.
wait, what's the other
Yeah.
one? Who's the mean people hippies. But you live in a hippie commune, so we'll skip over that for now.
Oh
So
no, no,
how
no.
long ago was
I
that was the original rave cave in the garage? How what's the timeline like here?
um. Oh God, it would have been. I actually think it was in April. I think it was April 2018. So it would have been 6 years ago, almost like around about 6 years ago this month. Um, but like, I mean, I say it was in a hippie commune house. I mean, that was just kind of the main thing, and that's used with a bit of endearment. But the
Mhm.
people that were showing up to the house parties were a real vagabond mix of everybody. I mean, actual hippies and doofers. Wait, do you understand the term doofer, or is that an Australian thing?
I do understand it, having had Australian friends, but for the
Ah,
people who are
cool.
watching this who might not, can you explain what it is?
Yeah, so a doof or a bush doof is a music festival that happens out in the bush, and it's generally focused on like drum and bass and psytrance music. And the vast majority of people who show up, you would culturally identify as a modern day hippie, whether they identify or not as such. They're really lovely, fantastic festivals. I've been to quite a few. I've been in bands that have played in Doofs before. But yeah, it's essentially a 3 or 4 day camping festival where the main focus on music is generally psytrance and drum and bass. But you know, there's a whole bunch of different. You know, there's live band acts that happen there. Dark bass is starting to become a little bit more prominent for certain Doofs which happen, which I'm very excited about. Yeah, it's generally like they range from everything of kind of like a very small thing of 100 people with one stage, all the way through to the biggest stuffs which happen in Australia. You know, attract I'm going to say about 10 to 15,000, go for 3 to 4 days, so 4 to 5 stages. Yeah, yes, they are quite fun. If you ever come to Australia, go to a Dorf.
Yeah, it's definitely on my bucket list. It's one of those uniquely
There,
Australian
there.
things.
Yeah,
So
very much so. I always forget because it's such a commonplace word down here. I always forget that it's kind of like this bit of local lexicon that's not really kind of known overseas.
yeah, I mean, not a lot of places just have like an expanse of bush that you can go out and throw parties in.
Yeah, no, very much so. I suppose kind of in the closest way you kind of relate to it, even though they are kind of apples and oranges to each other, is it's kind of like a Burning Man, but it's not quite like Burning Man. It's not, it hasn't kind of reached that kind of Coachella vibe of it. It's kind of a little bit seen to go to kind of a doof in the same way that Burning Man is. But I suppose at least what Burning Man kind of started has that similar kind of sense. It's a grassroots thing. It's about music and culture and like connectivity and those kind of things.
Yeah, 100%. All right. So it's cool to hear that, starting with Rave Cave and people being like, what is this? We can't really fit this in anywhere. To then, people finding it and being excited to find an event like that because they're like, nobody's doing this, but this is what we wanted,
Mm,
stumbling upon the market niche, I guess. Um,
very much so.
do you think that there's anything that sets Rave Cave apart from other electronic events in the city, apart from
Uh,
just the genre?
the main one would be tempo and BPM pacing. Vast majority of club nights that happen around Sydney are more kind of traditional dance speeds, like 128 plus, that kind of level. The fact that Rave Cave has a primarily focus on mid-tempo stuff is something that I've heard and from my own experience out there just doesn't really get done, not only in Sydney, but kind of elsewhere as well. And when they have kind of popped up like I've mainly noticed them pop up in Melbourne with clubs that have kind of waxed and waned, is they do kind of tend to get noticed for that same thing as it's most club nights are kind of focused on that more traditional, house kind of speed thing. So it has that kind of differentiation. And it's the main thing that I've noticed from people like that is people who've come to it is like, we've been looking for something that isn't just fast.
Hmm.
And I'm all about, you know, slow, grindy, bring it right down kind of vibes. So it's a compliment that I'm very happy to kind of, and like a thing that I've been very happy to be able to facilitate for people.
Yeah, it's brilliant. So, like,
Yeah.
how do you choose who to bring? Like, how do you curate the lineup for Rave Cave? Because, I mean, like we've said, it's not an incredibly popular genre or family of genres of music. So how do you go
Mm.
about finding people to come out and play?
Well, I mean, I suppose for the most part, I've been kind of lucky where within just my own little circle of friends and connections, I've been very fortunate to know quite a lot of DJs who listen to the kind of stuff that I like and want to play that kind of similar mid-tempo-y stuff. And it's just been very serendipitous of kind of like, well, I've started to think, let's do it. But I mean, there's also been elements of drum and bass that I like putting in there, and just other friends who play suppose you wouldn't call it mid-tempo in the genre kind of sense, but still fall into that BPM range. Like there's a guy who comes and plays every now and again called Perchance, who plays I'm not even sure the genre of it, but it's like it's a UK genre of kind of like mid-tempo-y kind of grindy stuff. I'm gonna remember the bloody name of the stuff that he plays about halfway through. Everyone go check out Perchance. His stuff is very good. I mean, quite a few of it has been from people finding the event by chance in the same way that you did, but be it more local people or just from recommendations of other people coming along. There is a collective that I can't remember how we got in contact with, but they're called the Newey Bass Crew, and they're focused up in Newcastle, to the north of Sydney. Everyone go and check out Newey Bass Crew. They're doing some really good stuff for people in the area. And they've been quite a good thing. I've picked quite a few people from because they do like artist showcase stuff for featured sets. And I've got a couple of people off their kind of advisement as well as people from Newey Bass Crew to come and play at the event. So I've been again kind of quite lucky that I've known quite a few DJs before all this started who want to play a similar kind of stuff. And it's just been serendipitous that Rave Cave's given us all a platform to be able to play our stuff when it's hasn't really been a platform around it, or at least that one that we could find.
Yeah, I love it. That's so good.
Yeah.
It's nice to hear a situation like this, where like different people are all kind of doing the same thing, but not they don't realize it. And then when you start to like come together and realize that there's actually, a scene or the possibility for a scene or a community around it.
Yeah,
So
very
cool.
much so. And the fact that it's all kind of been, I'd say a good 85% of it has mainly been direct friends or then friends of friends or like other people who've DJed have been mates and been like, hey, do you know anyone else who plays similar kind of stuff? And I'm like, oh yeah, I've got a mate such and such and he does really cool stuff. And they've sent me this stuff. I'm like, wow, this is really cool stuff. And I've had a chat and be like, yo, bloody bring on board. It's all been fairly grassrootsy as far as kind of people who've been involved. I mean, for the most part, we've had some kind of more like local names which have a little bit more of a clout in them come and play, and people from one or two people from interstate come and play. But yeah, it's kind of also that there's a nice bit of endearment as well that it has just kind of been all serendipitous of like friends and friends and friends, and so it's also helped keep that kind of community and house party spirit in the sense of kind of like everyone's involved already kind of knows each other's beforehand for the most part. There's not kind of been as much kind of reaching out to people and be like, hey, I know we don't know each other and have no connection, but I like your music and let's come and be on board. But even people, when they've been on that, they've kind of come in and kind of like, oh, hey, everyone here is really friendly and kind of knows each other and have kind of slotted in really well, which is nice. It's only been fairly recently that I've started noticing a bit of an outreach beyond kind of our own internal circle, which I think you have a bit to thank for that, for your own promotions of getting noticed of people who I would have no connection with or have no idea how they would have found out about the night, who've then come forward and been like, wow, I've been searching for something like this, or like I've been really struggling to put my own music out there because everyone has had a similar response to my own DJ mixes, kind of like, this is cool, but we don't know how to quite fit it in. So I'm quite excited for what the future holds for this kind of event. I've had people from Brisbane reach out who say they want to come down and see it. Have been looking for a night for this kind of music, but also a fan of your own stuff who found it through that, and other promoters that have just serendipitously found out about it, been like, oh wow, we've been looking to try and do some more stuff with this, and it's cool that there's a little collective that's doing it. It's been really endearing, just the kind of organic growth that it's had of just this little pocket of friends who like this, very dark, dirty, kind of sexy, grindy version of electronic music that's now kind of, finding a little bit of its own foot,
Yeah,
in
that's
the local
awesome.
scene. Yeah.
So hopefully it'll keep growing and you can keep expanding and bringing more people out and keep it going. But like you've been to a lot of shows over your career so far. So I'm wondering like in your
Mm-hmm.
opinion, what makes for a standout, unforgettable sort of music experience? And how do you think you could
Mm.
incorporate this with Rave Cave? Or is it something that you already keep in mind?
it is something I very much keep in mind. The first thing that I always have as a bit of a philosophy, which I got from D. Snyder from Twisted Sister, is that people go to see a show. The whole idea of going out and being in an environment is you are there to witness, view it, experience it. And it's something that I found really annoying when I used to play in metal bands, is the amount of bands that you see where, like, granted, like if you're playing technical, it's hard to, spin yourself around like closing the tumble dryer and pay attention to your fretboard. But the amount of people that just kind of just sit there like a picturesque statue and just don't move or do anything. Or I mean, but I've also kind of noticed it like in DJ circles as well, of kind of people that just don't interact with the crowd in any way, shape, or form. People go out and go to nightclubs or rock gigs or theater performances, any type of live entertainment, because they want to see and feel engaged with it. And if you can't, in some way, however that version may be, whether it be throwing yourself around like closing the tumble dryer, or kind of like, making eye contact and having little weird dancing moments with the people in front of you, or however it works, there needs to be some kind of interactive and connectivity with the people that you're engaged with. Another sense of it is just genuine enjoyment of being there. The amount of shows that I have worked on where it is blatantly obvious the people who are putting on this show and performing at the show are really just here to pick up a paycheck, and they couldn't give two flying whatevers about actually being there. And people feel that, whether it's on a subconscious level or not. I think everyone can kind of tell if you're seeing a performer and like they don't really want to be here. They're not really up on the stage because they have a genuine love and a feeling what they're doing at the moment. And they're driven by, there's a sense of passion or catharsis or release behind what they're doing. It's like, no, they're just here because they know they're going to get a paycheck, and at the end of the day, they're going to live off that. And yeah, I think on some level, people always notice that, whether it's blatantly obvious or whether you just kind of like, yeah, it was a good show, but there just wasn't something quite right about it. And that's something I've always tried to do when I've always performed. Is I've again, so now I'm realizing that I take a lot of my performance philosophy from D. Snyder. So he has this other line where it's kind of like, if you get off stage and you still feel the same as what you went on energy wise, you've stolen from the people who've come to see you. They could have spent their money on anything, or they could have gone out and even seen a better show, but no, they've chosen to spend their hard-earned money, and particularly now when they're in the middle of a cost of living crisis in Australia, stuff ain't cheap at the moment. They could have spent their money on going out and seen something better, or different, that was a little bit more engaging. So, if 150 odd people, or 200,000 people, 5 people have decided to spend their money to come and see you, you should thank them for that. And the best way you can thank them for that is by leaving everything out on your performance. I like throwing myself around and dancing around behind the decks and like screaming and shouting at people in a nice way. But to me, that's all a part of what should be a part of the performance. Is like, yes, obviously what you're playing and making sure that you're giving a clean mix is important. But there's also that sense of like, if you want to hear it played perfectly, go and listen to somebody's SoundCloud or buy the album.
Yeah.
As much as kind of like you shouldn't not be blasé about making mistakes, you should be doing your best to, pull off something that's, auditorily, as crisp and as precise as possible. If one thing has to give in between performance or like playing quality, I'm going to go with performance over the other one, because people will forgive little mistakes as far as kind of like, oh, that transition wasn't as neat as it could be, but whatever, this is still going really well. Whereas if you're boring, I think people notice that more.
100%. Even if it's not conscious, people can feel the energy, like you said.
I can still remember the most boring show I have ever seen, and it was a show I worked on. I worked spotlights for Justin Bieber, and his crew didn't want to be there. He didn't want to be there. You could tell most of his backing dancers wouldn't want to be there, and you can hear it in the crowd. Yeah, people like when he first came out on stage, there's that typical kind of, oh my God, and the fanboy kind of thing, and you can hear the crowd's enthusiasm dying down the longer the show went on. You could see it in his face. He did not want to be there. And it showed in the way that his texts were talking over, like, because we all have little headsets on for things, you could tell they didn't want to be there. And you could kind of tell that was coming from the top of him. And you compare that to, say, Justin Timberlake, who I did a show for back in 2017 or so. Justin's touring crew spoke the world of him. He was on first name basis with everybody. He kept up in touch with everybody's personal lives, little gifts and things of checking in with them, making sure they were okay on a personal level. And they were all kind of like, you could tell he meant it. Like, there'll be tears at the end of this tour. We adore him and he adores us. More of a proof of point, Justin found me backstage. Well, found me. We bumped into each other backstage because I was doing some movements for the support band beforehand. And he came up and shook my hand, and we had like a maybe 20-30 second conversation of, hey, like, you must be one of the local guys. My name's Justin. I just wanted to say thanks for working on my show. Are they treating you well? Like, yeah, no, it's good. And, is your tour going well? Yeah, no, it's going great. Thanks for asking. And anyway, I don't want to, keep you any longer, but I just want to say thanks for working on my show. And walked off. And he didn't have to do that. And it kind of, made me like, at that time, made me like, oh, it made me feel nice that I'm working on his show. And we watched the opening 3 songs of his show. And he got to a bit where he's meant to talk to the crowd, and everyone's fangirl and wooing over him. And he's genuinely getting choked up. He's trying to get words out, but you can genuinely tell in his head a bit kind of like, I get to do this all the time. I get to go out in the middle of a crowd and perform these silly pop songs that I really love. And I get to have these tens of thousands of people like scream at me like it's the best thing on the planet. This is fucking awesome. And there was a noticeable difference between the energy that was at that Justin Timberlake crowd and the energy that was at the Justin Bieber crowd. The energy at the Justin Timberlake crowd, only kept ramping, or at least stayed consistent, because you could tell by his performance, he was genuinely enjoying what he was doing, and he was genuinely appreciative of the people who were there. And that was a feedback loop that was happening. Whereas the Bieber thing just couldn't care less. And the energy of the show waned as a result of it. And I think that's an important thing that all performers need to keep in mind, is it's that sense of connection and interaction. That's the most vital thing for making a good show, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I'd have to agree. There's that balance to strike. Once you start doing anything like all the time and, touring, which is exhausting, then it can be easy to start to lose that perspective. So it's impressive to see Justin Timberlake like this far along into his career still having it hit for him like that. So I'm curious if he's had, like waves, like post NSYNC or something, if he was like, oh my God, like this is enough. And now coming back, he's like, yes, I still get to do this. Yeah.
Like very well could be. Yeah, I don't know. It's possible. I mean, we all go through, little wax and wanes and a creative flow. But at least the vibe that I got from his touring people is he just had a very, very strong realization that he's one of the luckiest people on the planet. He's super rich from what he does. He gets to dance around and sing and have thousands of people adore him all over the planet. And I don't think he takes that for granted and realizes just how fortunate he is as a human being. And he rides it like a bloody wave. And I think it's something I found admirable just from the words that his own touring party talked to him, and that little 20-30 second interaction I had with him. It was, just a little kind of thing of like, just enjoy what you're doing. Because if you're not enjoying it, why do you expect people who've come and paid their hard-earned money to enjoy it? If you can't enjoy it and it's your thing, why would they? Why should they?
Yeah. Yeah, it makes such a huge difference. I didn't mention it before, but I also did some of that stagehanding for a couple years, like during and after university. I don't know. It's funny. It's not like the old artists or the new artists or like this style or that style. It's really kind of a crapshoot about the amount of respect people have for their audiences and for the people who are working for them. I think one of the Ed Sheeran show I worked, he comes through the loading docks, right? And they're always, don't look at him, don't talk to him, leave him alone, etc. And he brought out some flowers that people had thrown on stage and like gave it to the forklift operator. Or like,
that's cute.
Lionel Richie, we were gonna go up and like break down backline on stage right after he got off, and they're like, sit over here, put your eyes down, don't look at him. And we're like, okay.
Yep.
And then Lionel Richie came up to us and thanked each of us and shook our hands for doing our thing. And like, dude, he's been doing this for decades. Like, he doesn't have to do that.
No, he does not, but he still does.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that. I've also worked on a Lionel Richie show before, and this had that same experience with their touring crew. It's strange. I found it to be a very American phenomenon of this kind of like, stay back from the artist, don't look at them, like, blah, 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 blah. I don't know what your experience is like when you've been a stagehand in your thing, but I've noticed that's a very American way of approaching touring artists. I find that it's a lot less common from people that I've worked with who've come from the UK and Europe. Get it a little bit with people with acts I've worked with from Asia, but not as much. I found it only particularly when it's been like stupid big K-pop acts, that kind of thing. But I think also a lot of their managerial style does kind of emulate like an American kind of model. So maybe that's where it comes from. I never really experienced it with any touring acts that I've worked with from Australia. But yeah, it is this very strange phenomenon of kind of like the American protectivism of kind of like, no, they're very important and they can't be burst. And a lot of the artists kind of like, it hasn't been initiated by them. And they kind of like, no, I want to say hi to people.
I'm a person too.
Yeah, exactly. And I've found, at least for a few of them, it can be, I'm trying to think of an example where because I've had a couple of them, where it's just been little things, and we've been like, oh, we were told not to talk to him, and then been kind of like a little bit shocked. I'm like, no, I'm just a person. Hey guys, like, God, I'm struggling to think of anything. But yeah, it'll probably pop up at some point in time. But yeah, a very American touring production way of thinking about artist talent. This idea of keep them isolated from everybody else.
Yeah.
It's strange. I don't think it's healthy.
I mean, obviously, I was doing it in America, so I don't have like a huge breadth of data to draw from here. Like, I'm trying to think of some UK acts I did. I did like the Queen with Adam Levine. Who are they touring with?
Oh, with Adam Lambert, yes.
Adam Lambert, there it is. Yeah, did that one, but I don't. Yeah, I can't think of it. We did have one. We did Enrique Iglesias, and some
Oh, wow.
some new guy like ran up to him after the show and like asked for an autograph as he was leaving, and he was fired directly thereafter, of course.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it kind of does go both ways. I mean, a lot of them do want to be treated like people, but at the same token, that does go and treating them like people of kind of like, look, we are all here to do a job.
Yeah.
You can't just go running up to somebody like that, like, and fangirl over them. Essentially, there is a little bit of etiquette, which is implied, which I get can be difficult. I've worked for some of my favorite musical idols through my point in time as a career, and the amount of times that I've had to stop myself from being kind of like, just go up and get an autograph or a photo. It's like, no, that's not proper. You're still at the moment getting an experience that most fans would, kill their firstborn son to have with. That's a little bit more valuable than a photo sometimes, or an autograph, is those little memory moments that you can get with people like that, which I'm thankful to have quite a few of in my 13 years in the industry.
100%. So, yeah, 13 years in the industry. Have you always lived in Sydney?
Yeah, no, born and raised. I grew up on the North Shore on the Northern Beaches, and lived there up until I left high school. And ever since then, I've mainly lived in the inner west, which is kind of like the suburb belt just outside of the CBD. And for the most part, it's kind of where the most it's kind of at least defaultly seen as where the vast majority of kind of like most creative and musical people kind of either live, or event stuff kind of happens on a grassroots level. I mean, of course, stuff happens kind of everywhere, but that's at least kind of its like outer perception.
Okay.
Yeah, is that the inner west is kind of more of the arty, left-leaning, creative kind of hub of Sydney.
All right. Gotcha. So I'm wondering, like, over all this time, how have you seen the music scene as a whole kind of shift? Because like I'm from Denver, and so
Mm.
seeing where it was, when I was in high school and starting to go to shows,
Mhm.
to where it was after I finished university, with it blowing up more and more, and then going back years later and seeing it become like, maybe pushing third biggest music city in the country. Like,
Oh, wow, really?
yeah, it's absurd. I can't afford to go to anything. I couldn't afford rent anymore. But they have like a
Yeah,
cool
right.
underground scene that's popping up now, like a bunch of DIY
Mm.
events and warehouse spaces that used to, I mean, they were there, but not as much. So it's cool to see it
Mhm.
grow. And I'm curious, if you've seen similar things in your city.
Yeah, there's definitely been a little bit of a nightclub and event renaissance, particularly post-COVID. There's been a lot of stuff that's popped up, which has been really endearing to see. It's been in the 13 years that I've been involved, it's been a fair roller coaster, particularly in Sydney. I don't know how well internationally advertised it was, but for a good, I'm going to say it was about 7 or 8 years, Sydney was subject to what were called lockout laws.
That was my next
And
question. Yeah.
Yes, those things were disastrously detrimental and terribly irresponsible thing that was done to our city, and we are still kind of recovering from them. And there are bits that will never recover from them. So for those who don't know, the lockout laws came into effect. God, I can't even remember when. Maybe it was 2014, 2015. It could have been earlier, something around then. It was the early 2010s at the least. And they're a result of the fact of a couple of people got what were called king hits, which is kind of punched and hit on the and then fall on the pavement to the point where they needed to be taken to hospital, and quite a few of them died. And the local state government, which is our conservative government, the coalition government, made a big hullabaloo about this. Sydney's gone out of control and blah, 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 blah. And things need to be done to protect the local people. It wasn't taken into account that violent crime rates, particularly ones that involve in hospitalization, had been on a steady decrease over the last 10 to 15 years. It didn't fail to take into account that the lockout laws, which started restrictions from 11 o'clock, that all these incidences that were caused as a result happened at about, I think it's about between 8 and 10 p.m. So at the bare least an hour before any of these things came into effect. And it was also pretty blatantly obvious to everyone the main reason why this wanted to happen, and has been a clear result of what's visually happened afterwards, is it was largely just about real estate development. Most of these events happened up in King's Cross, and King's Cross has some of the most valuable real estate as per land, not only in Sydney, but in the country. And the vast majority of it had been held up by apartment blocks which had been there for generations, and nightclub and venue places. And real estate had had quite a hungry eye on these for ages. And it was pretty blatantly obvious that this was kind of the main driving force behind the lockout laws, mainly because, I mean, not an expert on it, but there's been multiple different reports into connection between real estate developers and government personnel and political personnel in Sydney, which, I mean, is fairly common through most parts of the world, unfortunately. About 6 months after the lockout laws came into effect, I had a couple of friends who lived in King's Cross. A couple of them lived in these older apartments, and all of them were given eviction notices. Those apartment blocks don't exist as they do anymore. There was a nightclub that was right at the top of the stretch on the King's Cross. It was called the Goldfish, and the Goldfish was a nightclub establishment in Sydney for decades. It had no reason at all to fail. It was very, very successful. It was always packed, right? That is now a luxury Woolworths and luxury apartments on top of that, all completely knocked down.
Of course.
Yes, the King's Cross area, which had no reason to advertise itself, started getting posters that were put up down the streets as you would for any kind of touring gig saying, come to the Cross. Nobody needed to advertise to go to the Cross. It was one of those places where, like, it's the nightlife, one of the nightlife establishments in Sydney. So yeah, it was quite debilitating for a lot of nightclubs and outdoor life in Sydney. I used to work in about 4 or 5 nightclubs, just helping set up with friends like that. None of them were like, you know, making money hand over fist, but all of them were profitable and had no reason to shut up shop, right? All of them had to close within, I'm going to say, 2 months of these lockout laws coming into effect, because nobody was going into the CBD anymore because of the stupid restrictions that were put in place. I can't remember exactly what they were, but it was something kind of like once you got in the venue, you weren't let out after 11. I think like drinks had to stop at some point. I think it was like 1 o'clock in the morning. Like stupid things like that. It also didn't fail to notice everybody's minds that if you had a look at the map of Sydney where the lockout laws came into effect, it was all of the CBD except for this tiny little pocket where the casino was, which for some reason was exempt from all of the lockout laws. I'm pretty sure everyone can put 2 and 2 together for that. And sure, granted, crime rates dropped inside the CBD, but it was something kind of like crime rates dropped by about 1/3, but overall attendance of like people in the city dropped by like 80% or something. So like the amount of attendees per crime kind of thing was completely out of whack now. Mm-hmm. But the surrounding areas of the suburbs around mainly Newtown, all this, like the surrounding suburbs had a massive spike in increase of attendances, and also a huge spike in violent incidences. dramatically more so than what were actually sold from these lockout laws putting into effect. There were protests and political parties that were put up as a result to try and squash all of this, which, you know, I went to numerous marches of these. They happened for quite a few years. Thankfully, these laws have now all been scrapped. I can't remember the exact rationale as to why, but I mean, kind of the read between the lines is they got as much real estate out of the inner city as that they possibly could. And it's like, okay, well, now you can have your nightlife back. Sydney has been kind of Sydney is still struggling to come over a lot of the ramifications from what's happened. We lost quite a lot of good, substantial nightclub spaces that don't exist anymore, just because they weren't given the means to actually keep afloat. But I mean, like the lockout laws got scrapped before COVID, then COVID's happened. And it has been very nice and endearing to see, to put a, you know, not to put a positive spin on things, because I do actually think it's an objective uptick that's happening in Sydney, is there has been a little bit of a nightlife renaissance post-COVID as a result of everybody being inside for 2 years, particularly in kind of like alternative and queer and goth clubby stuff. The amount of club events that have popped up post-COVID has been really endearing to see. Not only that, but with the attendance that's popped up as a result, as people have been hungry, really hungry after being locked inside for, God, what was it, 2.5 years to go out and see some stuff. And there's been some really good events that have popped up as a result of that. I mean, I credit a fair bit of Rave Cave's success as been kind of being like, yeah, we started doing events again as soon as we could. Post-lockout laws happened and people have been hungry and wanted to come out to that, and people have stuck around for that. And other events have kind of seen similar results. There's another nightclub which I play every now and again called Reunion, which is, I think, also kind of been riding that wave a bit. Another one I play called Yokai Beats has also done that. Halo, another event that I played, has done that. There's another event called Sanctuary, which is kind of like the goth club in Sydney. They were the first off the cab of the rank and had been riding the and had been hugely successful result ever since. And it's still going quite strong. I could rattle off names like this and keep going. But yeah, it's been at least really encouraging, particularly after the damage that was done by the coalition Liberal national government in this state. It's been very nice to see how enthusiastic people are post-COVID to go out and try and flourish a sense of community and go out to events of every, you know, from live music stuff to club nights to everything in between. And while it's sad to see what we lost during the lockout laws and the damage that that objectively did do to our city, it's nice to at least see the community hunger and the results of attendance and quality events that have popped out in Sydney as a result of that. And I look forward to the years that are coming forward quite hopefully for Sydney and its nightlife in general.
Yeah.
Which is very nice to feel, particularly as someone who makes his living off the industry.
100%. I mean, this is an outside perspective, but it sounds optimistic. It almost sounds, you know, like scorched earth, like a forest fire. You had a thriving scene beforehand. So many huge artists came out of Sydney, I guess, like, or out of Australia as a whole. But, you know, there was like your Alice in Wonderlands and your Flume and What So Not and Golden Features and all these people that used to play shows in King's Cross. And, you know, I would hear about it as like a kid on the internet and then was vaguely aware of the lockout laws. And then pretty much have that all get just demolished for, you know, private interests to eat up, to make more money. And then COVID. But now coming back, it's almost like, you know, a fresh seeding of things, because the people are there. Like, the people still want the community. They were forced away from it, but there's a desire among the citizenry and the community to bring it back. So
oh, absolutely, absolutely. And that's been really encouraging and endearing to see. But I mean, even beyond a local club level, the entire industry, and, you know, I assume that's fairly similar for most parts of the globe, because everyone was inside and hungry to just do anything to be out of their four walls. The entertainment and live music scene in general in Australia has been in a bit of an uptick. We're having quite a bit of a trouble with bigger festivals at the moment being profitable. And a lot of that, I feel, comes down to A, the cost of living crisis that we're going through down here, but B, just how bloody expensive it is to get productions down to our part of the world. You know, if you want to bring a touring thing over from America, the flights and travel and stuff that's involved and that's the cost as a result to get down here is quite high. But then also when you get down here, it's not like, say, in Europe where you can, go an hour and a half down the road and you're in another city that's got 6 or 7 million people, the same way you can do in the States. We've only got so many big cities here, and a lot of touring acts that come down here won't even go to all of them. It's pretty common for big touring shows or festivals that come down here. They will only play Brisbane and Sydney and Melbourne, and they won't go to Perth or Adelaide. Barely anyone goes to Darwin or Hobart. Those are very, very rarely ever thought of, which I think is a shame, particularly in Hobart. Hobart has a wonderfully beautiful music and arts and culture scene. There is a festival that happens down there called Dark Mofo every year, which is just creme de la creme of, everybody goes there. Have you heard of Dark Mofo before?
I've never heard of it, no.
You need to look it up and try and see if you can get down there. You will love it to a T.
Okay.
I've never personally been. I've had tons of friends go. I've had friends who perform at it, but I've seen all the photos and been like very envious of missing out on certain people who've gone down and played there. It's a fantastic thing that happens down there every year, and kind of like the first beginning of winter.
Okay. Is that more like the butterfly?
Oh, I'm Dark Mofo, MOFO.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Really, really cool festival event that happens. It's been happening down there for quite a while. Very boutiquey, very kind of like, let's find stuff that's very left of field and a little bit eccentric and weird. And like Health have played there like once or twice. So has Chelsea Wolf, the first two big ones that I know have played down there that I've really regretted missing. I'm sure I'll think of other ones, but yeah, it's a really fun little festival. But yeah, we're in a bit of a weird flux with at least big stuff coming down here at the moment. There's been quite a few headlines at the moment about how hard it is for our big festivals to make money. Quite a few festivals have had some pretty big skew-ifs that have been all over the news lately, or have just had to completely stop because we just can't afford it. And a lot of that has come down to the cost of living things. So we do have challenges at the moment. A lot of them are purely financial. There's the hunger to do stuff, but yeah, this is the downside of us being post-COVID. It has caused us fairly bad inflation rates and a bad cost of living crisis, which we're all dealing with at the moment.
It seems like everywhere, dude. It's well fucked.
Oh yeah. I know we're far from alone on that front. I know the only one that I'm kind of more aware of is just the situation in the UK and just how much of a mess that is. They're dealing with fairly similar kind of situations to what we are. But I still try and remain positive and hopeful for the most part, mainly because I can see the hunger for it is there.
Definitely. So we can almost wrap up here, but I had a few more questions I wanted to ask you.
Sure.
One of them would be, what advice would you give to aspiring DJs or event promoters looking to, maybe break in and start their own scene or putting themselves out there in the local scene?
On a DJ side of things, I would say don't try and play stuff just because you think it's going to get you in the club. Play the music that you want to spin and play. And if that's weird, play some weird stuff. I get that speaks very much to my own experience of, and as a result, being very lucky of the stuff that I want to play is stuff that people want to hear and kind of starting at my own night and yada, yada, yada. But the genuineness that you get out of doing and playing what you want to try and spin and figure out, you can't get that if you just want to go and be like another run-of-the-mill like tech house DJ, or or just playing something because you think it's going to get you into a club. Play what you want to play, and even if you don't find clubs immediately that you want to get yourself into, it took me about 2 years of mucking around with stuff before I had to start my own thing with Rave Cave to start getting noticed. Allow it to take time. And just remember, there's also a big community of people out there online. You don't even have to find local stuff. I've got a lot of friends who stream and are very successful with, streaming to people over in Europe and the US. It doesn't necessarily have to be in person, as much as, it is kind of nice to be in a crowd and environment in a room and do things like that. Allow it to take time. It doesn't have to be a rush. As far as a promoter goes, pay people well is the only thing that I can kind of put forward as a main thing. Make sure that you sit down and figure out a business model and where you can do things where you pay people well. it's a big gripe for me when I see events which I know are clearly doing okay, and I know can afford to pay people a little bit more, but want to cheap out on it. It's not needed. Quite frankly, I think if you're a promoter getting into this industry and you're trying to do it to get rich, you're an idiot. It should not be about making anybody rich. It should be about a rising tide raises all ships. And if that means everybody gets a little bit of money instead of you getting a nice wad of cash and nobody else getting everything, you haven't made a scene. You've just made yourself wealthy. And people will start to resent you for that, whether you realize it or not. And it just doesn't create a good working background. I always try and have a philosophy of a rising tide raises all ships. You know, the only way that people keep enthusiastic is they feel they're getting something out of it. And, you know, as much as kind of like money's a weird, icky thing, and, you know, we all be doing it because we love it, and we all do it because we love it. But at the end of the day, you know, we've all got mouths to feed and roofs to keep over our heads and bills to pay. And if you can go out and play a night and be like, oh, sweet, you know, I had this really good night and everyone was really nice, and I've got this money, you know, like you know, that's my phone bill I can pay off, or I can pay my rent for the week now because like this is awesome. That's a tick over effect that encourages people to kind of want to do this and push more into it. You know, if they can go out and play a show night and know that that one show night covers their rent for the week, you know. Another thing I would probably say for promoters is figure out your money side and the way of promoting to yourself with a venue. Make sure you know roughly how, like whenever you can with events, try and figure out, you know, how many people are there, what the average take over the bar might be. You know, if you can chat to the promoter and be like, hey, do you know how much you think it makes over the bar for a night? I know some venues like talking about that, some don't. But you can kind of get a rough idea. If you're like, okay, we'll say there's 150 people in the room, roughly everyone's going to have about 2 to 3 drinks. So find out how much a drink is, and you can roughly figure out how much this event is making a venue per night. And that's, I think, really useful for kind of, and that's something that I found has been really good for when I've pumped Rave Cave to other people, is like when I had that start off in that little bar. First off, it's kind of like, okay, well, I now know what the average spend per head is. I now know what the revenue for this place is. I can use that to promote it and go forward, which I suppose would be another thing, is don't be afraid to start small. You know, Rave Cave started in the public eye as a tiny little thing in a 42 capacity venue that was free entry, and was very honest with everybody up front. I'm like we had a donations box at the bar, and just everyone was like, hey guys, like this is a free entry thing. I'm not someone who makes a lot of money. Whatever is made over the donation box will be split evenly between everybody. You know, but that's the only way I can get forward. If that doesn't suffice for a night of things, I completely understand that. I can't afford to offer anything more. And thankfully, everyone who was involved in the first one was very amicable with that. But as soon as it came to a ticket event, it's like, okay, you now get a flat fee. Like everybody gets paid this much per minimum per hour. I always have discussions with other people if they have a little bit more clout to be kind of like, you know, what their rate is. And I don't like to barter with people, you know. Yeah, I feel I've rambled enough about that.
No, that's all right. Yeah, no, on a tangentially related note, I also hate bartering.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
terrible at it, and I'm bad at confrontation. And everybody here in Vietnam, it's like, Bart, you get something big, they're like this much, and I'm like, okay, and then they're like, okay, and I'm like, oh fuck, I was supposed to bargain there, wasn't I? That's not how
Yeah,
much that
today
costs.
that's something that I like. I still haven't been to a country that has kind of bartering as kind of considered a default, and it must be so weird to be in an environment with like it's going to cost you this much, and you go to give them, they kind of look at you like, why are you giving me what I asked for?
Yeah.
It's such a strange foreign concept for me. Like I've a big part of what I have with the philosophy of Rave Cave is like I'm not out to do this to make money. I want to make other people money. Like, you know, I have a very lovely graphic designer, photographer called Grim Reflections, David Zurab, who does all of, you know, the beautiful artwork that's behind me and that's up online for Rave Cave. At no point in time have I ever argued with what his um, with how much he costs, even though, like, I mean, you know, he's not cheap, but he's also deserves to not be cheap. The stuff he pumps out is incredible for the event night. And so the DJs who come on board, you know, I've never once had a thing where I don't feel the need to ask them to be cheaper to put on what they want to do. To me, that's not ethical. You know, to me, that's in a sense of if what they've asked for is too much, it's like, okay, well, cool. I respect where you're coming from, but maybe you might be something I need to save up for.
Hmm.
You know, I don't believe in cheaping out on people. That's not right as far as I'm concerned, you know.
Hmm. Yeah. I think that was solid advice. I hope that it is helpful for whoever may or may not watch this. Last couple questions. It could be one artist or it could be a few people. If your event were to grow over time, um,
Mhm.
or you had some other position where you were able to bring out talent, who are some of your dream artists that you'd love to bring out to Sydney?
Oh, that's easy off the top of my head. I mean, the person that kind of got me into this flavor of music was Giuseppe Stein. It would be, I mean, completely unreasonable, for the international festivals that that man headlines, and rightfully so, to expect him to be on board. But I mean, as a fever dream, he would be amazing. Another one would be Street Fever. He's someone who's also, and their music has also very much fundamentally shaped what I DJ. Um,
Yeah, he's a dude. He's a
pro-
unit. I bet you could get him.
I doubt I'd be able to afford him.
Yeah,
And I mean, particularly seeing as the shows that I'm seeing and doing over in the States at the moment is tour, where it's a big art extravagant kind of piece. I mean, particularly with a venue where now it's nothing would be able to facilitate, or a small nightclub, and that man needs like a large stage, and rightfully so for the stuff he's doing. Those performances look amazing. They
yeah.
don't exist anymore, which really disappoints me. But the artist, well, the duo that I think has mainly informed my musical taste are a French duo called Aguilar.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, do you know Aguilar?
I do. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Them, those two more than any other have informed where my musical and DJing stuff has gone by any other person, well, any other people rather. And it's a shame they don't exist anymore. Like Ipon is what one of them has gone off to do, is really, really cool and funky.
Yeah.
But there's just something about Aguilari's stuff that just, I can still remember the first night I heard it. And it was out the back of the hippie commune house, actually. A friend of mine called Ben showed it to me. And it was one of the tracks off, I can't remember the name of the EP, but I heard it and I was just like, this is it. This is it.
Was it the
And I've
Mort
been in.
EP?
I can't remember if it was the multi P or the other one.
Okay.
Um, um, God, I can't remember. I've got a very bad memory for names and things. I'm hearing the song in my head right now. But yeah, the first EP they did was just I'd never heard anything like it, and I still don't think I have. For some, I suppose for people who are a little bit more kind of like in the realm of things. I mean, like Al Vision is another big one for me. Laserpunk, who you've done work with, his stuff's awesome. He'd be sweet. Um, God, I'm drawing blanks here at the moment. I shouldn't be. I mean, that's a good collection of people.
That's a
Yeah, yeah,
solid
like
collection.
yeah, yeah. I suppose if I had to have someone who was at the top of my dream list for real, like for realism, it'd probably be Street Fever.
Okay.
Um, that having them come down here would just be a dream come bloody true.
Yeah.
I've always been in awe with what they've done with their music, and then seeing what they're doing with their live performance stuff. Like they're a full package, and really do kind of encapsulate that thing. What I was talking about is like you go to see a live show, and the photos and the videos have got like that is a visual feast to witness. A beautiful performance piece with their just beautifully eerie and eccentric and dark, sinister music that they make. It's going to be good shows to watch.
Yeah, I imagine it is. That's like one of my biggest regrets about moving out of America is I've just missed so many good shows.
There's the health tour that's happening over there at the moment, which has King Yusuf and Pixel Grip. Pixel Grip would be another one who I'd like to have, but I suppose at the same token, they're a band piece and we're specifically DJ stuff, but Pixel Grip would be high up there. But I would bite off my left arm and leg to go and see King Yusuf, Pixel Grip, and Health play. Like that tour must just be absolute weaponry
Yeah.
at the moment. And I'm very, very jealous that the US gets to see the three of those.
Yeah. Well, God has favorites. All right, last question. Looking to the future,
Mhm.
what do you have any like long-term goals for Rave Cave beyond, you've been seeing organic growth and it's been good. Do you have like a, best case scenario, or are you happy to just kind of like let it keep rolling and do what it does?
The, I never want to have Rave Cave be a thing where I feel it needs to grow. If it does, cool. If it reaches the end of its time, cool. It's been a hell of a fun time as it is. And even if, I mean, I don't think it will be, as much as at this moment you very much are. But if having you come down here happens to be the crowning point and achievement of what I've got to do with Rave Cave, then that's bloody sweet.
Mm.
you know. And I'm very proud and privileged for the fact that you've consider us worthy to come down and play for us. Like I really can't thank you enough for
Dude,
agreeing to come down and do this. You have like those list of people that are rattled off beforehand. You would also be someone who would mention that if I was talking to somebody else. So, like, thanks for coming down and joining us. It really does mean a lot to me and to kind of everyone else who's coming and playing on board. I would like to do. We've just started a subsidiary night called Cavern. That's happening this Saturday. And the idea of it is to be like a genre showcase night. The first one's drum and bass. I've got ideas to do other ones. So like I at least hope that, I mean, it's very much looking like a success. Tickets are being very helpfully sold for that. Um, I would like to try and do more of those and maybe do like a night that's purely like dark synthwave as a theme for that, or like, like a hard industrial techno night. That might be another thing. Um, Getting other international people to come down here and headline it eventually when we have the money for it again would be also a lovely thing to do. But yeah, Rave Cave and the philosophy I've had behind it has always been it's always been just keeping a nice house party kind of vibe, at least with the people who come along to it. And that's always been the main goal for that. It's never about it being the biggest or baddest thing on the planet or have it growing from strength to strength to strength, regardless of that's what it's been doing. Um, yeah, the only thing I want to happen with it is what it's continued to do is for people to come along and feel like there's a sense of community and warmth and, not kind of like walking in this kind of like it's a cold club and people just here to be seen and cool. Like, no, people have genuinely come along because they've liked the music and want to connect with other people. And I've really, really appreciated that and felt very lucky that that's what me and everyone else who's been involved in Rave Cave has been able to do. So I suppose at least what I hope for the future at Rave Cave is just consistency and keeping that.
nice.
We've been very fortunate with what we've all been able to do to kind of keep that sense of it being very warm and welcoming, for the very dark and evil music that we play. So yeah, I suppose the hope for Rave Cave's future is purely just consistency. It's just and whether that consistency and just consistency and vibe, and whether that consistency and vibe is growing to bigger venue spaces and more people and more international headline acts, which would be lovely to do, then awesome. If it keeps going along at the exact same pace that it is, also equally as awesome. If it reaches a point in time where it's time to hang up the hat and do something else, then cool. I can look back and feel very proud and accomplished of what we've been able to achieve over the years that it's run and the amount of people that I know it's made happy and felt like there is a sense for this kind of music to have a home. Um, Having said that, I do feel pretty hopeful that things will grow, particularly as a result of this gig. I think the exposure that having yourself on board and the promotion that you've done has opened up to a lot of channels outside of my own little circle and the circles that we have. So I can't thank you enough for that. There have been quite a few people who've popped out of the woodworks who've been like, oh my God, I found this. And it's been as a result of your own promotion and having you on the bill. So you've been a big part of helping us be a little bit bigger and badder than we are. So thank you.
Sick, man. I'm more than happy to help. It's nothing. I'm just excited to be there.
Oh,
Just happy
dude,
to be here.
we are beyond excited to have you down here. I'm really looking forward to this show. I've got quite a few ideas in my head for what I want to do for the set, which will be the rest of my evening. Working on that and nutting that out. I'm very much looking forward to seeing not only what you have on board, but what Pretense also has on board. He's been another lovely person that's popped out of the woodworks as a result of you being on board. So thank you for
Yeah.
recommending and suggesting him. I'm beyond stoked to have him on board. Also can't wait to see what Alicia Mayhem and Sinclair, who are also on the bill, have on board as well. Alicia has this lovely kaleidoscope of stuff that she does depending on what she's feel liking, and it's always a joy to see her play. And Sinclair also has this lovely little kaleidoscope of what they like to do everywhere between kind of like this beautiful floaty drum and bass stuff through to kind of like more down dirty mid-tempo-y things. And so I'm very interested to see what they have on board. I know they're stoked and are a very big fan of yours, as is everyone who's on the bill. So, I have no doubt everyone's going to bring their A game for this from what they've been talking about. So yeah, like May 18 can't come soon enough.
Dude, it's gonna be fucking sick. If you're watching
Oh
and you're
yeah.
in Sydney and you don't, or if you're anywhere in Australia that you could plausibly fly to Sydney for this show, May 18th, me, this guy,
Mm.
more people, it's gonna be fucking amazing.
Yes, yes. I'll do a little bit of spruiking myself. So we're playing at Tokyo Sing Song, which happens at the Marlborough Hotel in Newtown on May 18th. Tickets are available online via Humanitix. If you search Rave Cave Mobius on Google, we're the first thing that kind of pops up as a result. If you've ever thought of coming along to a Rave Cave and you're seeing this, this is the one to come and go and see. You know, two master weapons as kind of the headline things with yourself and Pretense on board. I think what I do is pretty okay. Alicia is just an absolute weapon of herself, and so is Sinclair. I'm really proud of this lineup, and I think it's going to be one damn good night.
Yeah, it's going to be stacked. Excellent plug. Well done.
Thank
Professional delivery.
Do my best.
Fantastic. I think that's about it, unless there's anything else you wanted to add. Any like particularly good celebrity stories that we glossed over?
Oh God, you could get me going in the amount of times that I've met like celebrities and either like they've been amazing or things. So maybe it's best we save that for another podcast.
Let's save that for the next one.
Yeah,
right.
but we'll be here all night if you get me going on those.
All right, sick man. Thank you for taking the time.
No, bless you, man. Yeah, again, it's a pleasure to have you on board. It's a pleasure to be a part of the podcast. I can't wait to meet you in person.
Yeah, just a few weeks, man. Count
Hell
it
yeah.
down. All right.
Love it.
Peace.